right, Hearth and Homies, welcome back to the channel. Now you can see I've got a long sleeve shirt on tonight because we're going up to the Yukon. That's right, today's adventure is the Challenge of the Yukon. We're going to join King and Sergeant Preston as they fight bad guys in the Northwest Territory. Now, Challenge of the Yukon was like the third major show that George W. Trendle did for his Detroit radio station, WXYZ. I think I read somewhere that the Lone Ranger's great-grandnephew was the Green Hornet, and then Sergeant Preston, I think, was supposed to be his cousin, something like that. Now, the episodes we're going to hear in this compilation are some of the 15-minute shows that were run on WXYZ before it was picked up by ABC. The show was later changed to a 30-minute format and then was broadcast nationwide, first on ABC and then on the Mutual Broadcasting Network. Now, later in its run, the name of the show was changed to Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, and of course, that was the title of the TV program. Thanks for joining us for the Challenge of the Yukon. I'll be back at the end of the show to share a few more things with you.
The Challenge of the Yukon.
Oh, King! Have you husky?
The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. In 1833, Alaska and the Yukon Territory were for the first time invaded by white men. Before these men appeared, the Yukon had known countless generations of peace, inhabited only by Indians who were disinterested in the yellow flakes of glittering ore they found in clear streams and along riverbanks. To them, animal skins were far more valuable, and it was for the same skins the Count Igor Petronovich made the journey to an unknown land. But any furs the handful of white Russians secured were never to grace imperial robes in faraway St. Petersburg. It was late in an afternoon in the year 1834. A tribe of frenzied savages gave voice to a cry of triumph as they watched a fort the Russians had built go up in flames. They thought they had killed all of the white men when suddenly a tall, dark-haired man with flashing eyes walked toward them. His hand was raised, and in it was a small figure carved in ivory, studded with rubies and diamonds. Behind him walked an Indian.
Munalak, what are these peace-loving countrymen of yours saying? Why do they bow down in front of me? Can they know who I am? Do they know they killed the men I brought with me? I, Count Igor Petronovich, from the court of Tsar Nicholas himself?
Them see fire in eye of little man you hold in hand. Them think you fire god. Walk through fire, not be burned.
Oh, so they don't know I was not in the fort, huh? Tell them they must take me to their village. They must start building me a boat. Tell them, do you hear? Tell them they have displeased the fire god. And unless they do as I command, fire will descend on their villages. Their people will be killed.
Count Igor Petronovich joined an expedition at the headwaters of the Yukon River and set sail for his native Russia, thinking the idol he left behind was a small price to pay for his life. As for the idol itself, it remained with the Yukon Indians. Many years passed before white men again disturbed the peace of the North Country. The tribe moved their quarters and settled near a lake, the chief himself carrying the sacred figure to the site of their new village. Then, 1897, and in the white man's world, excitement was everywhere. Gold had been discovered in the Yukon. Sally Lawson, with her stepbrother Tom and Jim Wilson, left Dawson far behind them as their sleds covered the frozen trails. 4 days passed, then a week, and in the middle of the second week, as they sat beside a campfire, Sally spoke to Jim Wilson, glancing occasionally at her stepbrother, who stood inside the tent flap, studying a piece of paper.
He hardly talks anymore, Jim. It's been tough on you, hasn't it, Sally? You never should have come in the first place.
Perhaps not. But Tom's the only relative I have, and I didn't want to stay by myself back in Seattle. Seattle. It seems like a long way from here, doesn't it?
I guess it does. Only, I wish you wouldn't worry about this. Tom got that map from an old-timer. He paid him for it, Sally.
Whatever he paid for it, I'm beginning to think the whole thing's a fake. I think we should turn back.
We'll wait a few more days. Give him a chance to prove he's right. Remember, part of my money's wrapped up in that sheet of paper, too.
Well, we can hope for the best anyway. Tom, I'm going to turn in.
All right. We'll start early in the morning.
Nice.
Good night, Sally. Tom. Sally's worried.
Oh, she doesn't know what it's
Tom, I want you to be truthful with me. You've been off the track these last few days, haven't you?
Well, what do you mean?
Just what I said. We couldn't go back now even if we wanted to, could we? We're lost, isn't that it?
Yeah, that's it. And there's only one thing to do. Keep going.
It was a week and a half later that an Indian scout found them, wandering in the snow, half dead from hunger, half crazed with despair. They were taken to the Indian village. In one of the tents, Tom Lawson talked to the poker-faced Indian who'd saved their lives.
We sure are grateful to you. You've saved our lives.
Indian friend, white man.
Yeah? I wouldn't think you'd seen any white men to be friends with.
Yeah. We see many white men. Policeman wear red coat. Him talk to chief now. We see white man long time by. Him bring fire god to Indian.
Fire god, huh? Who's that? Well?
The unanswered question aroused Tom Lawson's curiosity, until finally, piece by piece, from various men of the tribe that had befriended him, he got the story and a description of the idol that couldn't be bought with any amount of gold.
Have you heard anything about it, Sally?
I? Goodness, no, Tom. What do I care about the superstitions of these people? They've been kind to us, that's all that matters. You haven't seen that mitten of mine, have you?
It must be worth plenty. It can't be bought, they say.
I wish you'd forget about that little fire god. If I don't find my mitten, my left hand will be... That must be Jim. I hope he's found it for me.
Oh, Miss Lawson.
Oh, how are you, Sergeant?
Hello, Tom.
Howdy.
I just stopped by for a minute. About the mitten you lost.
Did you find it?
Oh, no, I didn't find it, but you certainly can't get along with only one, so I brought an extra pair of mine over. Probably too big for you, but at least they'll be warm.
Oh, well, that's very generous of you.
Not at all. Well, now I've got to get back. The Indians are having a meeting, and I've got to sit in on it.
That was nice of him, wasn't it? These are warm. You know, Tom, I think we might as well go back to Dawson. That map of yours is worthless.
Maybe we won't get the gold we came after. But what if we could get something that would be worth a lot more than gold?
Worth more than gold?
Never mind, Sally. We'll get set to mush in the morning.
They left the village early the next day. Tom drove the dogs hard, and by the time darkness had fallen, they'd covered about 30 miles. That night in camp, Tom called to his sister and Jim Wilson.
What is it, Tom? Something wrong?
No. I just wanted to show you something. Look.
What an ugly thing.
Why, it's carved ivory.
Yes, and those awful devilish-looking red eyes. Almost look as if there's fire dancing in the... Tom, you didn't take it. You didn't...
Sure, I took it. And just look at it. It's worth a fortune.
Tom, you shouldn't have. When the Indians discover
She's right. They'll be on our trail in no time. You've got to take it
After
back.
all the trouble I had getting it? Not on your life. Sally, hand me that extra mitten of yours.
What extra mitten? Tom, you've got to take that back.
Come on, give it to me. Preston gave you a pair, so you've got two right ones. Now, slip the idol inside it. A fortune in diamonds and rubies, and it fits inside a mitten.
When the next day dawned sharp and clear,
Sally Lawson came out of the tent to find Jim Wilson standing beside the embers of the campfire.
Morning, Jim. I'll start breakfast right away. Isn't Tom up yet?
He's gone. Must have cleared out during the night. He took the sled with him. When the Indians come hightailing after us, it'll be you and me they'll catch. Well, Tom's making a getaway with a little fire god.
The Indians arrived at the camp a short time later, and with them was Sergeant Preston and the great dog King. Preston and the chief of the tribe listened to the story the man and the girl told. But as the Mountie nodded, there was a wary distrust in the old Indian's eyes.
Fire god gone. You take Indian fire god. Indian kill you.
They didn't steal the fire god, but the man who was with them did. You can't kill them, Chief Owega. That would be murder, and you'll pay with your own life if you take theirs.
You say you catch 'em, thief?
Yes.
Bring 'em back to village with fire god?
Yes.
We take man and girl to village.
All right, and I'll go find your fire god. On King! On you huskies!
Meanwhile, Tom Lawson frowned to himself as he rode the runners of his sled.
Yes, I'd like to know that mitten's right in front of me on the sled where I can see it. Only the darn things keep blurring. It's my eyes. Just as if I had sand in them. Ho, you Malamutes, ho! I make sure that mitten's there. I can't. Ooh. I know what's wrong with my eyes. Sally's got the snow goggles in her pack. But I'm snowblind. I gotta get my hand on the bar of the sled. There. Now, mush, you Malamutes! Hey, the dogs are leading me! I can't see! I'm blind! I'm snowblind!
When the dogs pulled, the sled had given a sudden forward lurch, throwing Tom Lawson off balance. He fell headlong in the snow, and as he raised himself on one arm, he could hear, but not see, his dogs fading in the distance. Struggling on in the snow, he was unaware of Sergeant Preston, who was already close on his heels.
Strange, that turn he made in the trail several miles back. Whether Lawson knows it or not, he's heading back to the Indian village. Maybe he intends to return the idol. Now, wait a minute. How are you, huskies? So you already discovered it, huh, fella? Tom's footprints go one way and his sled the other. He fell here, and the sled went on without him. Well, we'll follow him.
King took his place at the head of the Mounties' dog team, and as they covered the trail, his sharp ears caught the sound of another pack in the distance. Turning, King cut through the timber, the sound of the snarling dog serving as his compass. Following the tracks of the driverless dog team, King stopped suddenly. For a moment, he was puzzled. Then he slowly approached the supplies that were sprawled in the snow. He saw where the sled had overturned and had been dragged on by the dogs he could still hear. Seconds went by as the dog sniffed the air. A familiar scent filled his nostrils. Quickly, he found its source, Preston's mitten. In the Indian village, Sergeant Preston stood facing a circle of men who'd become suddenly unfriendly. Beside the Mountie stood Tom Lawson, his hands rubbing his burning eyes.
Him take fire god. Him no have fire god.
That's right, he doesn't have it with him, but it's on his sled. I'll go after the sled.
Sergeant Preston tell us him bring back fire god. Him not keep promise. Indian no keep promise.
You must trust me, Chief, and I'll bring it back.
The policeman's words fell on deaf ears. The circle of faces began to close in on the Mountie and his companion. And then, looking beyond the Indians, Sergeant Preston saw King running toward him.
King! King, old fella. Where'd you find my mitten? I didn't lose it. Oh, there's something in it. King, old boy, you certainly saved the day this time. Chief, is this what you're looking for?
You bring back fire god. You keep promise.
Sergeant, are they going to kill us?
No, they're not going to kill anybody. But to tell you the truth, I was mighty worried for a few minutes.
Oh, Sergeant, isn't that the mitten you gave me? How did you... It's for the right hand. That's the one Tom took to put the idol in.
Sergeant Preston, Chief Owega heap sorry him not believe you when you say you bring fire god back. Indian never again not believe what you tell him.
What's he talking about, Sergeant? You mean you found the idol in the mitten?
I didn't find it, Miss Lawson. My partner did.
Your partner?
Yes, King found it. Yes, fella, Thanks to you, this case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They are sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon. The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. Wayne City in 1898 was a hurriedly thrown together settlement with a few frame buildings, scattered log cabins, and groups of tents. Its population included men of all types, most of them prospectors. But all of them had come to the Yukon with just one thought: to get rich quick. In front of the cabin that served as a post office was a sled and a dog team. Beside the team stood a lead dog, not harnessed to the pack, but part of it. His coat shone in the sunlight. His proud head was high, and the muscles of his body showed beneath his skin, even in repose a reminder of strength and agility. His eyes were turned to a group of prospectors not a half a dozen paces away from him. They were gathered about a clean-shaven man who looked expectantly at the faces around him as he spoke.
All right, men. Come on, step right up and get your cake of soap. Mighty hard to buy up here, and I'm offering it to you at the low price of only $5 a cake. Take a whiff of that fragrance, boys. You wash with this soap, and I guarantee you'll smell so good the ladies will come for miles
wait
around.
a minute, Mike. You mean when you wash with that soap, you really smell like that?
You bet your life you do. You get clean and you smell good for the price of only $5. You gonna buy a cake, mister? Don't let him gyp you, Clem. I bought a cake from him, and it not only don't get the dirt off, but darn it all, once you get the soap out of that there wrapper tin, there ain't hardly any smell to it at all. Now, listen, Sam, if that was true, I'd give you your money back. I'm not trying to gyp anyone, just make an honest living. I'm telling you it's true, and I'm right here. But I know darn well I ain't going to see that $5 of mine again. If that's an honest living, What about that, Mike? Why, I'll prove it to you. If you can prove it, Gallagher, by golly, I'll buy every one of them cakes of soap you're holding in your hand. That settles it. You've as good as got 'em right now. Eh? How you going to do it? There's your answer. Huh? That dog? Where I come from, folks wash their dogs. Chances are that mutt over there ain't ever seen soap and water in his life. I'll get him clean, and what's more, he'll smell good. Hey, now, Gallagher, you can't wash that dog. Yeah, what's the matter? Backing out already? Come on over, Jen. I'll prove to you Mike Gallagher ain't misrepresenting this soap. You're asking for trouble if you touch that dog, I'm telling you. Don't you know who he is? Dog's a dog to me. All right, Pooch, you're going to get it back.
With steady eyes, the great dog King watched the man walking toward him, the crowd following close at his heels. And as the man neared him, the smell of soap filled the dog's nostrils. It was a hated smell, and the cocksure man associated with it was even more repulsive. Mike Gallagher stretched out his arm to grab the collar about King's neck.
His owner's going to thank me for this, boys. His owner ain't going to thank you for anything, Gallagher. I'm telling you, this dog...
He don't look like he needs a bath to me. Look at his coat.
Just that the dirt don't show. You'd be surprised.
Hey, you better...
Gallagher's hand touched the dog, and as it did, King bared his teeth. The hair on the back of his neck bristling dangerously.
Why, you... Going to get mean, are you? I'll show
Get away
you.
from that dog, Gallagher. He ain't aiming to take no monkey business.
King looked at the soap salesman, his eyes glowing fiercely. The dog hadn't moved an inch. And as he stood imperious and menacing, Mike Gallagher involuntarily backed away from him. His hands dropped to his side.
I told you to let that dog alone.
Well, we're all set now, King, old boy. Put the mail on the sled.
There. All right, fella.
On King! On you husky!
Dog belongs to the Mountie, huh? And in case you never heard of him, that was Sergeant Preston. Next time you plan to make a dog out of fool, Gallagher, you better make sure who he is. Come to think of it, your little plan kind of boomerang, didn't it? Don't worry. I'm not forgetting that dog. No, I'll lay even money on it that he won't forget you either.
Months passed, and Mike Gallagher made his way further inland, selling soap in some towns and gambling in others. Finally, in Weston City, he settled down, bought the Wildcat Saloon, and started in business. Behind the long bar in the Wildcat, two men worked filling and refilling glasses for the prospectors and trappers lined up in front of them. The younger man had an expression of determination on his face, and the bartender who worked with him glanced at him in disgust.
Oh, I tell you, you're completely crazy, Sam. Gone daft, that's what you have.
But I saw it myself, Barney. A solid piece of gold the size of my hand. There's more where that came from, and I'm going to get it.
Yeah, sure. And I guess you know exactly where to find it.
Hello there, Barney. It looks like you're having quite an argument. How are you, Sam?
Oh, fine, Sergeant.
This crazy fool's got the notion in his head he's going prospecting. Gold fever is what...
I've got enough money saved up to last me a while. And I'm hitting the trail in the morning.
You see, Sergeant? You can't talk any sense to him.
Well, maybe you'll be lucky, Barney.
Lucky. Sergeant, I've been filling glasses a long time for disappointed old leather-faced galoots a-hunting for the rainbow's end. And all they get for all their trouble in digging is a busted heart. Well, I wish you luck, Sam, but I sure think you're making a mistake.
Barney Kramer went on with his job at the Wildcat Saloon, and for 2 months he didn't see Sam Ritchie. When at last he looked up to see the young man walking toward him, he could hardly believe his eyes.
By golly, I'm glad to see you, Sam. Well, the place ain't been the same since you left. What do you got up your sleeve? You look like the cat that swallowed the canary.
Look, Barney, is there any chance of talking to you alone?
Huh? Sure. I'll be with you in a minute.
Oh, there it is, Barney. You can see for yourself it's the McCoy.
Well, it sure looks like you struck it, kid.
Now, if you'll take me, we'll be partners in this. I want to go on working the claim, but I just don't have the cash I need to go ahead.
Well, to tell you the truth, I ain't got more than a few $100s. But you're welcome to that, understand? But I'm afraid it ain't enough to... Say, Gallagher's always interested in something that'll make money for him. Come on. There's no reason why this can't be a three-way partnership.
Sam Ritchie's strike proved to be even richer than he hoped. And as Mike Gallagher watched the returns from his investment piling up, he had no reason to regret the partnership he'd made. But the man was greedy as well as money-wise. And late one evening, hours after the Wildcat had closed, he went to Barney Kramer's cabin.
Well, hello, Mike. This is kind of unexpected.
Oh, thought I'd stop in for a while.
Well, I'm glad you did. Say, were you talking to Sam? He come into town again this evening, and...
Yeah, I saw him.
Sure was a lucky day for us when we went into partnership with him, huh? Yes, sir, by golly.
Only one thing wrong with that partnership, Barney.
Huh? What's that?
Partnership usually means two partners. In this case, there's one too many.
I don't get you, Mike.
You will.
Hey, what's the idea of that gun?
That one too many is you, Barney.
Now, wait a minute. You can't...
Can't I? There's not a thing in the world to stop me. Snow's falling now. It'll cover my tracks when I leave here. Nobody knows I pack a gun.
Why, you double-crossing, no-good skunk.
You won't do anything, Barney. From now on, it's a two-way split. In a little while, the claim's going to have but one owner. And that'll be Mike Gallagher.
A short time later,
Sergeant Preston arrived in Weston City. He had decided against camping along the trail and had urged his dogs on, covering the last 20 miles to the settlement hours after darkness.
Well, King, old boy, we made it. It looks like everybody's turned in for the night. Oh, not quite everybody. Bonnie Kramer's still up. We'll stop in and see what the chances are of bunking at his place tonight. Ho, King! Ho, you husky!
The Mounties stood knocking on the door of the cabin, the light from the windows shining through the falling snow. He waited for an answer. And then...
Barney. No wonder he didn't come to the door. Yes, fella. He's dead, all right.
King stood near the sprawling figure on the floor. Two strong scents filling his nostrils. The scent of death he knew as soon as he walked into the cabin. But this other odor.
Barney evidently put up a fight for his life. He tore this piece out of the murderer's shirt. Now the snow's already eliminated any tracks. Well, fella, murders have been solved with less evidence than this. What is it, kid? Boy?
The next morning, Sergeant Preston, with King at his heels, walked into the Wildcat Saloon. Even at that early hour, men were lined at the bar and sitting at poker tables, their eyes widening with surprise as the Mounties strode through the room. But more surprised than any of his customers was Mike Gallagher.
Well, Sergeant, this is a surprise. Didn't know you were in town.
We just got in last night.
Oh, well, you have a... Dog of yours seems to be in a bad humor.
What's wrong, King?
King stood in front of Mike Gallagher, the dog's fur bristling stiffly from the scowling brow to the tip of the tail, bristling as it had done 2 months before. He recalled the obnoxious odor of soap as he glowered at Gallagher. The same odor he had detected in the cabin the night before.
What's wrong, King?
But the dog stood motionless, knowing Preston would not understand if he were to jump at this man.
He doesn't stop that growling, you'll have to take him out of here, Sergeant.
King got on his mind, Sergeant.
Mike, King is an infallible judge of character.
Yeah? Well, he's judging the wrong man now. Get him outside. I'm not going to have any dog carrying on like that in here, even if he is yours.
Now, wait a minute. I just remembered. When we were in Barney Kramer's cabin last night, he acted the same way. As if he knew something that I didn't.
Oh, you stayed at Barney's last night.
I don't like to give orders to a policeman. But this is my saloon, and if...
Yeah?
Frisk him.
Go on. Keep your hands in front of you, Mike.
Hey, what's the idea? You can't get away with this.
Hey, what's this? Hey, Mike, I didn't know you carried a gun.
I'll take that. One cartridge fired. That's 38. Mike, this was the gun that killed Barney Kramer.
What? Why, you're crazy. I don't know anything
Kill
about it.
Barney?
Open your coat, Mike. I said open it. Where'd you tear your shirt?
Why, you won't get me up. Get off of me! Stay away, do you hear?
All right, King, all right. Got all the proof I need, Mike.
Sergeant, you said Barney is...
Yes, Sam.
But why would Mike kill him? We were all partners. We never had any arguments or anything.
I don't know why exactly. Perhaps because he thought he'd get a larger share of the gold with Barney out of the way.
Poor Barney. Tell me, Sergeant, how did King know?
I'm not sure, Sam. In Barney's cabin last night, I wondered why he acted as he did. I guess I'll never really know the answer. But he was right. All right. Come on, Mike. Get moving. Yes, fella. The case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They're sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon. Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his wonder dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. It was early morning when Sergeant Preston and the two men with him sighted the Indian settlement in the distance. The strong, ice-flecked wind that had whipped against them earlier died down. But even as they approached the village, the great dog King, leading the Mounties' pack of huskies, caught the unmistakable scent of death. He knew, even before the three men saw the signs, that the village was in mourning.
What do you make of it, Sergeant? The engines seem awful quiet.
Yeah, you're right, Marsh. It does seem like something's wrong.
I think I know what it is. All right, fella. Okay, roll your huskies. See those men gathered in front of that temple?
Yeah.
There's been a death in the tribe, Marsh. Here comes one lock. You'll tell us who it is.
Wouldn't you wonder, Stu, how the sergeant can tell one engine from another? They all look alike to me.
Indian glad Sergeant Preston come. Chia, long-time friend, Sergeant Preston. Him die.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, one lock. I knew you were in mourning, but I didn't know about Chia.
We buried Chia today. You stay for burial?
Yes, of course I'll stay.
Good. You come with Wanderlock now.
All right, King. Come on, fella.
We'll stay here with the sled if it's all the same to you, Sergeant.
I'll be back shortly.
What do you make of that, Stu? That engine fellow Wanderlock treats the sergeant like a blood brother or something.
These tribes think a lot of that, Mountie, and no wonder.
Yeah? Well, me, I like to get back with this white man. Concerned if I want to be around whilst these redskins are burying their dead. Never saw any good come out of their powwowing around yet.
As the time drew near for the Indians to begin the burial ceremony, Marsh Ramsey was plainly uneasy. Only the comforting presence of a .45 carried in his belt sustained him. He watched the Indians bring a rude wooden coffin to where a grave had been dug. And then, as the men of the tribe stood waiting, the young Indian brave Wanderlock came forward. He had a book in his hand, and from it he began to read in the language of the Indians. At intervals, the tribesmen responded in unison.
Well, I'll be doggone.
What's eating you now, Marsh?
Doggone if this don't seem just like a Christian burial. Them engines sound like they're praying.
Sure.
Marsh, you look like you just seen something you can't quite believe.
That's it, all right, Sergeant. You took the words out of my mouth. I've seen a lot of engines in my time, and I've fought plenty of them, too, out in the West in the good old USA. By golly, I never seen them heathen savages do anything like this before.
Well, the answer to that is simple. These Indians aren't heathens.
Oh, now, wait a minute. You can't...
You heard the sergeant, Marsh. What's more, there's a story behind what you just seen.
It'd have to be some story.
It is. Now, the sergeant here ain't much for going around blowing his own horn, but I happen to know a good part of that story. And I can tell it to you if he won't.
That's so?
I know what you're talking about, Stu, but King deserves a great deal of the credit.
Yeah, sure he does. But what about telling Marsh here how it happened? Unless you do, he's likely to go on till his dying day thinking he was seeing things up here. And let me tell you, Marsh, if you get a burial half as decent as the one you just seen, you can rest easy.
Well, come on over here to the longhouse, and I'll tell you about it while we're waiting for the chief. You've heard a lot about Jim McCready since you've been in the Yukon, Marsh. Well, when I first met him, he was well known in a different way. Reverend Jim was a small man. I'd say about 5'2". He didn't weigh very much either. Wherever he went, trappers and prospectors towered head and shoulders over him, and their voices were usually loud enough to drown his out. Well, late one night, several years ago, King and I went into the Penguin Saloon in Cranford. It was crowded and noisy.
Hey there, Sergeant. Looking for somebody?
Oh, I just thought I'd drop in and see if I can... Well, that's Big Bill Carson over there, huh?
Yeah, he's sure having himself a time. Seems like a reverend come in a while back trying to get some of the fellas to contribute to putting up a church.
Oh, must be Reverend Jim. And I gather Big Bill thinks it's funny.
Yeah, sure he does. Because he makes more noise than any of the gents around here, you probably talk him out of helping that little preacher. Let's go over.
Oh, here now, what do you think, boys? We got a gent of the cloth here what's going to show us the error of our ways.
Oh, shut up, Bill.
What do you mean, shut up? Why, you little run-off, flatten you out like a postage stamp.
Now, gentlemen, please. I had no thought to start an argument.
Good evening, Reverend Jim.
Oh, Sergeant Preston, I'm glad to see you. Indeed, I'm very glad to see you.
You see, Marsh, Big Bill Carson was the kind of man who had a genius for stirring up trouble. But it was trouble that ran under the surface. He wasn't bold enough to carry it beyond that point. But sometimes men of that type can be dangerous. Now that I look back, I can remember King watching him as Bill stood laughing at Reverend Jim. The fur on the back of King's neck bristled. Maybe it was his tone of voice, maybe it was his attitude, or something he did, but whatever it was, I knew King had taken a dislike to Bill. But later that night, Reverend Jim came to see me.
I don't like to say it, but I'm afraid I'm not the right shepherd for this flock, Sergeant.
Oh, I don't know, Reverend Jim.
I'm sure of it. When I got this assignment, Bishop Hendricks told me it was a man-sized job and that it would require a great deal of faith and perseverance. I'm just not built for it. These men need someone who can be as tough as they are. To speak frankly...
They'll come around. Give them time.
I'm afraid it's a question of more than time, Sergeant. A great deal more.
Several months went by. King and I were busy on patrol duty out on the trails. There'd been many times when I'd wondered about Reverend Jim, how he was making out. I wondered, too, about Big Bill Carson. I knew Bill was up to no good. But it wasn't until later that my hunch proved to be right. King and I had stopped at Fort Munn, which is several hundred miles up the river from Cranford. We found they were having a serious food shortage there. Carson had evidently got word of it, too. He went to the Indians who'd settled outside of Cranford.
Chief, you and me have been dealing at the trading post for a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's like I told you. You've been overcharged for everything you ever bought there. Now, just because you're Indians, there's no reason why it should cost you more to buy your supplies. You got a right to clean off them shelves at the post to even up the score.
Yeah, me call council. Talk too brave.
Clean off the shelves, I say, and show them cheating traders no mercy.
Me go talk 2 minutes tried.
See, Lefty, what'd I tell you? These Indians are just like putty in your hands if you know how to handle them.
Yeah, but Bill, what if they get up on the warpath and kill the traders? That's murder. And the Mounties will be on our necks for it.
They won't be on our necks. The Indians will get the blame for it. Once they get the supplies out of the post, they'll probably start a celebration. Then we'll load what supplies we can on the boat, take them up to Fort Munn. We'll get any price we ask for them. Come on.
All you men there, get that log. You're better than door down. Get up. Come on now, the door's about to give.
I was on the trail from Fort Munn while Bill and the Indians were getting away with the trading post supplies. King and I were just a few miles from Cranford. We'd taken one of the back trails to save time when we met Reverend.
The townspeople have just discovered what happened, Sergeant, and they're going to start after the Indians, and I'm afraid there's going to be bloodshed. I was heading for the Indian village to try to
Maybe
tell
we can
them...
head the party off along the trail, Reverend Jim.
All right, boy. On King, on you Huskies!
King was ahead of us, breaking a trail through the timber from my sled and Reverend Jim's. We were about to come out into a clearing. King had reached it a minute or so before we did. The Indians were just crossing it, but King ignored them. He looked instead to a rock formation. He stood for a moment sniffing the air. Then he turned to the right, circling. He covered the ground so quickly his paws seemed to barely touch the snow.
Sergeant, where did your dog go?
I don't know, Reverend Jim. We'll be out of this timber in a minute. Then we'll deal with the Indians.
On you, Husky!
Oh, look, there's King on top of one of those rocks over there.
I looked over toward the rocks. And as I did, I saw the barrel of a rifle glitter for a moment. I realized that Reverend Jim and I were the targets. And before I could reach for my gun, I saw King jump. Well, the shot went wild. Reverend Jim and I had both been saved by King.
Well, who was doing the shooting?
It was Big Bill Carson, Marsh. A short time later, the Indians stood around and Bill was under arrest for attempted murder. Supplies were saved and could be sent to Fort Munn. Fortunately, the traitors hadn't been killed.
That was about the time me and the men from Cranford got there. With Sergeant Preston to act as referee, we got the Indians straightened out on who was cheating who. And Bill, without his guns, was standing there with his hands at his sides. But he was still loud-mouthed as ever.
So it took a Mountie and a preacher to break up my plans, huh?
You know, Sergeant, I'm beginning to see something I never thought of before. These Indians, they need a shepherd as much as the white men.
You're right, Reverend Jim.
Seems like you ain't learned yet, Reverend, that what you need to get along in this country is more than just a good book.
I've always thought the good book was sufficient, Brother Carson. But what else do you have in mind?
A fighting pair of fists and you ain't got 'em.
That sounds like a challenge.
Call it what you like. I still say it takes a man to get along up here.
I'm sorry to do this, Brother Carson. And you understand, I bear you no enmity. But would you like to prove that point? Sergeant, with your permission.
Well,
What's the matter, Mountie? I ain't gonna run away. But you'll have to carry the Reverend back to town.
All right, Brother Carson. I'm ready. I'm terribly sorry, Brother Carson. I didn't mean to hit you so hard.
He's out cold, Reverend Jim.
Is that so? Well, you know, I never hit a man in my life. I've never been a fighting person. I suppose it's the air up here, Sergeant, and living outdoors. Oh, here, Brother Carson, let me help you.
Well, what do you know? I'll bet them Indians had a lot of respect for the Reverend after that.
They did, Marsh. I never saw him raise his fist to fight after that. But the knowledge that he could must have pleased him. He worked with the Indians for several years, learned their language, and had the church service printed in it for them.
Then that must have been a church service that Indian read at the burial this morning.
Why, sure it was. And you know, when his bishop heard about what a fine job Reverend Jim did here in the Yukon, he sent for him. Yes, sir. Reverend Jim went back to England. And he's a bishop himself now. I'll bet he tells that story often, eh, Sergeant?
Yes, I guess he does it that, Stu. And thanks to King here, Reverend Jim and I live to tell the story.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They are sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon.
A king and you husky!
The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge
and justice ruled triumphant. Two men walked into the long, narrow frame building that served as a bank in Morriston. They walked one after the other, and before he closed the door behind him, the second man looked back to the warmly dressed lookout standing by the sleds. They exchanged nods, and, apparently satisfied, the man closed the door.
Looks like you're about ready to close up.
Huh? Oh, yes, that's right, we are. We just made it in time. Say, I don't think I've ever seen you before. Gonna open an account here?
No.
Oh, then you have one. Funny, I never forget a face. I never would have thought that... what's the name?
We're wasting time, boss. Let's get the dust and get out of here.
What did you say the name was?
I didn't. Drop that book, mister, and reach.
What the...
Now you can walk over and open that safe.
Oh, but
you heard me. Get moving.
Yes, sir.
Duke, you go over and get what dust's in the cash drawer.
Sure, boss.
Quit stalling. Spin that combination.
I'm a little bit nervous. There. Now, maybe I'd better...
Stay where you are. Lift that paper money and the gold out of there.
I got what dust was out in the drawer, Chan.
Good. Now load all this in the sack.
There. That's all that was in the safe.
Let me see. Yeah, you're right. You've been mighty obliging for a money counter.
No, wait. You're not going to... No, please.
That number you got for faces ain't going to do us any good. You ready, Duke?
I got it all, Chan. Except those pokes.
All right, then take these pokes and go on out to the sled.
Yes.
I'll be right with you.
Listen, I'll forget I even seen you. A lot of people come in and out of here.
I never take any chances.
No, wait a minute, please.
A week passed, and then, in the early morning, at an isolated spot surrounded by birch trees, a driver halted his team of dogs. The sun glinted blindingly on the snow, and a fierce wind stabbed the man with icy intensity as he stood before the cabin.
Oh, it's you, Chick. Come on in.
Where's the boss?
Right here. Meet my breakfast. My friend Gent's early, Chick.
Charlie Sullivan saw us leave the bank in Morriston. He's on his way to Half Mile now to meet Sergeant Preston.
Red was on the lookout.
Well, he slipped up. I was in the saloon over there when I heard about Sullivan. And if he gets to Preston, Chan, your neck's as good as in a rope this minute. And the rest of us ain't much better off.
Yeah. That Mountie.
That Mountie's been out to get you a long time. You've just been lucky so far that he ain't been able to get enough evidence to do the job up the way he'd like to. But it looks to me like you'll get all you'll need. Unless you stop Sullivan, and stop him fast.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Duke, get the sleds ready to travel.
Okay, Ted.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to stop Sullivan. What's more, I'm going to stop that Mountie, too. I'm tired of running from that redcoat. Every time we get a good thing, he starts nosing around.
Wait a minute. It's suicide to murder a Mountie. Why, the whole force would be out on our skins.
Don't worry. We've already got an idea. Our first job's to head off Sullivan. Then we'll take care of Preston.
Taking the back trails, Chandler and his men made good time. The wary gunman had been silent during most of their trip, and when Chick returned from scouting late the next night to report he'd seen Sullivan making camp, Chandler questioned him for several minutes. Then, early in the morning, they were on the trail before daybreak.
Listen, Chan, I'd feel a lot better if you'd let me know what you plan to do.
You'll see in a few minutes. Ho, you huskies, ho there!
How do you expect to get down on the trail from here? Guess you expect the dogs to make a jump from this ledge.
See that herd of caribou over there?
Yeah, sure, but what's that got to
Pass
do with...
down there's mighty narrow, isn't it?
Yeah, it's narrow, so what?
So Sullivan will be coming through here in about 10 minutes. There's not a track down there yet, so... What's wrong?
Hey, there he is now.
Yeah. Wait till he's well into the pass so we won't be able to turn around in a hurry. Chick, double back quick. Drive over there behind the herd. When you hear my rifle, start firing. You get me?
Sure. Mush, you huskies! Mush!
Once those bulls start running, there ain't a thing on feet that'll stop them. So, you have a meeting with Preston, huh, Sullivan? The only place you two will ever meet will be on the other side of the grave. It's getting closer. Wonder if Chick's ready yet. Now.
It was a week later, and on the trail north of Half Mile, where Charlie Sullivan had met his death, Sergeant Preston stood, looking up to the ledge walling the narrow pass.
Glenn McCall said this was about where it happened, fella. If Sullivan hadn't sent me a letter, I never would have known he was on his way to Half Mile. Well, evidently someone else knew, too.
The great dog King walked beside the Mountie, sniffing the air curiously. For mixed with the animal scents that came to his nostrils was another scent, the scent of a man. He looked to Preston questioningly, and then ran over the icy crust of the snow to discover the source. A few minutes later, he came on the man, leaning against a rock, his rifle trained on the Mountie, who walked back along the trail.
Preston's dog, huh?
Almost at the speed of light, King lunged at him, tearing the man's arm from the rifle. And as the dog stood, his fur bristling dangerously, he kept the man from retrieving the weapon that had fallen to the snow.
Caribou herd still in the hills, that's it. I'll get the money the same way I got Sullivan. All right, you mutt. Too bad my revolver's in camp.
King caught the threatening tone in the man's voice, and as the man retreated, leaving the rifle behind, the dog waited until he was out of sight, and then went back to his master. Carefully, the Mounties searched the hills and the trails for the signs of a camp, unaware that the tracks Chandler left in the snow were designed to lead him into a death trap. The next morning, with King leading the dogs, Preston followed the sled tracks of the man who seemed to be playing hide-and-seek with him. The sharpness of the outlines told him he was close to the man he sought.
Well, he's going through the pass, fella. We'll turn here and take the trail through the trees. We'll make better time with luck. We may be able to head him off. On, King! On, you huskies!
A short time later, the Mountie sighted the slope which eased down toward the pass. A herd of peaceful caribou milled around like cattle. Watching them, Preston saw two men standing well behind the herd with rifles resting on their arms. He went toward them, his own rifle in readiness. But King had caught a scent, the scent of a man he recognized, and the dog turned sharply back toward the ledge overlooking the trail.
Oh, you huskies! Oh, what? Hey, Duke, it's a Mountie. Drop those rifles and put up your hands.
Not before I get a shot at you. Oh, my shoulder! He got my shoulder!
At the sound of the rifle shots, the frightened caribou raised their antlered heads and began to run. The two men standing before the Mountie's rifle looked wide-eyed after the herd, and while Chick Kramer put his hand to his wounded shoulder, an expression of horror crossed his face.
Duke, look! Down there in the pass, it's the boss. The caribou will run him down. He won't have a chance.
Sergeant Preston shifted his position. With his gun still trained on his prisoners, he glanced toward the pass. Standing firmly on the ledge where it graduated into a slope was the great dog King, his eyes fixed on the man looking frantically at the frightened animals running toward him, their treacherous antlers lowered, their flying hooves drumming a terrifying message to the man trapped in front of them. Jack Chandler ran from his team toward the ledge, struggling for a foothold, reaching for brush, a twig, an extended rock. Anything that would save him from the sure death running steadily toward him.
I gotta grab that rock. If it'll hold. Oh, if I can only grab that rock, I'll be above the ramblers.
His fingers closed on the edge of the rock, and Jack Chandler raised his eyes to face the bared teeth and menacing growl of the dog who had disarmed him the day before. Like a man hypnotized, he looked into the dog's eyes. Then, in a breathless instant, Jack Chandler disappeared, to be swallowed up in the herd of frightened animals his men had stampeded.
Chandler? Why, when Charlie Sullivan got it that way, I never thought the boss would.
Jack Chandler was responsible for the death of several men. He's beyond the law now, but you're not. You're under arrest, both of you.
The great dog rejoined the group of men, satisfied that the man who had fallen from the ledge would never again make an attempt on the life of his master. But as Duke and Chick moved sullenly toward the Mounties' sled with Preston's gun held on them, neither King nor the policeman knew that both men had but one thought: to escape.
It's a good 2 days' trip to town, so we'll hit the trail now. Travel as far as we can, then make camp. All right, get the dogs up, King.
That night, as the light of the campfire flickered low, the two outlaws talked quietly.
You know what's waiting for us when we get to town, Duke.
Yeah, sure. But I ain't aiming to stop one of the Mounties' bullets.
This way we stand a chance. We got the dust stashed away, and now it'll only be a two-way split. I tell you, we got everything to gain and nothing to lose.
King raised his head from between his paws as the two outlaws crept from their bedding.
What is it, fella? Quiet.
Get to your sled, Duke. Come on, get out. Let's get out of here.
Apparently, Sergeant Preston dozed, his head low on his chest, oblivious to the persistent tugs from King's teeth pulling at his sleeve. As the sled started and was well away from the camp...
Don't look so disgusted, fella. They've made a getaway. But if my guess is right, they'll head for the spot where they've got their loot hidden. All right, get the dogs up, boy. We're going after them.
With King leading the dogs, the Mountie followed the tracks clearly edged in the snow. It was after daybreak when they arrived at the cabin. Preston pulled his sled into the protection of a rock formation. Meanwhile, inside the cabin...
Hey, Chick, what are you standing at the window for? Come on, give me a hand with this dust.
Yeah, I should have thought of it. The Mountie, he followed us, Duke. Get your rifle. We'll give him a fight. Just wait till he lifts his head over that rock. Yeah, I think we're going to bag us a Mountie, Duke.
There, give it to him. He's ready to shoot it out, Chick.
Yes, so are we.
For long, endless minutes, the battle waged. 2 men against 1, the bullets striking against the rock sheltering Preston. And then, at a word from his master, King went silently through the timber, doubling back toward the cabin. The great dog knew what he had to do. Instinctively, he steeled his body for the impact that was to come. The large window was at the side of the cabin. Duke and Chick were firing from the front of it through the cracks in the logs. King measured the distance, then broke into a run, gathering speed with each long stride, and then the jump. Seconds later, the window smashed at the impact of the dog's body.
Hey, the dog, get him, Duke! How can I get him? You don't stay in one place long enough, they're going to beat him.
Drop your guns. You heard me drop them.
Okay.
Well, I see I'm just in time to take the gold you've collected back to town with me. You're under arrest, both of you. And this time there'll be no escaping. Yes, fella, thanks to your help, the case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They're sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon.
Oh, King! Run, you husky!
The wonder dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his wonder dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. Two men walked into the long, narrow frame building that served as a bank in Morriston. They walked one after the other, And before he closed the door behind him, the second man looked back to the warmly dressed lookout standing by the sleds. They exchanged nods, and, apparently satisfied, the man closed the door.
Looks like you're about ready to close up.
Huh? Oh, yes, that's right, we are. We just made it in time. Say, I don't think I've ever seen you before. Gonna open an account here?
No.
Or then you have one. Funny, I never forget a face. I never would have thought that... what's the name?
We're wasting time, boss. Let's get the dust and get out of here.
What did you say the name was?
I didn't. Drop that book, mister, and reach.
What did...
Now you can walk over and open that safe.
Oh, but
you heard me. Get moving.
Yes, sir.
Duke, you go over and get what dust in the cash drawer.
Sure, boss.
Quit stalling. Spin that combination.
I'm a little bit nervous. Now, maybe I'd better...
Stay where you are. Lift that paper money and the gold out of there.
Got what dust was out in the drawer, Chan.
Good. Now load all this in the sack.
There. That's all that was in the safe.
Let me see. Yeah, you're right. You've been mighty obliging for a money counter.
No, wait. You're not going to... No, please.
That number you got for faces ain't going to do us any good. You ready, Duke?
I got it all, Chan. Except those pokes.
All right, then take these pokes and go on out to the sled.
Yes.
I'll be right with you.
Listen, I'll forget I even seen you. A lot of people come in and out of here.
I never take any chances.
No, wait a minute, please.
A week passed, and then, in the early morning, at an isolated spot surrounded by birch trees, a driver halted his team of dogs. The sun glinted blindingly on the snow, and a fierce wind stabbed the man with icy intensity as he stood before the cabin.
Oh, it's you, Chick. Come on in.
Where's the boss?
Right here. Meet my fresh. What brings you in so early, Chick?
Charlie Sullivan saw us leave the bank in Morriston. He's on his way to half mile now to meet Sergeant Preston.
Red was on the lookout.
Well, he slipped up. I was in the saloon over there when I heard about Sullivan. And if he gets to Preston, Chan, your neck's as good as in a rope this minute. And the rest of us ain't much better off.
No. That Mountie.
And that Mountie's been out to get you a long time. You've just been lucky so far that he ain't been able to get enough evidence to do the job up the way he'd like to. But it looks to me like you'll get all you need. Unless you stop Sullivan, and stop him fast.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Duke, get the sleds ready to travel.
Okay, Ted.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to stop Sullivan. What's more, I'm going to stop that Mountie, too. I'm tired of running from that redcoat. Every time we get a good thing, he starts nosing around.
Wait a minute. It's suicide to murder a Mountie. Why, the whole force would be out on our skins.
Don't worry. We've already got an idea. Our first job's to head off Sullivan. Then we'll take care of Preston.
Taking the back trails, Chandler and his men made good time. The wary gunman had been silent during most of their trip, and when Chick returned from scouting late the next night to report he'd seen Sullivan making camp, Chandler questioned him for several minutes. Then, early in the morning, they were on the trail before daybreak.
Listen, Chan, I'd feel a lot better if you'd let me know what you plan to do.
You'll see in a few minutes. Ho, you huskies, ho there!
How do you expect to get down on the trail from here? Guess you expect the dogs to make a jump from this ledge.
See that herd of caribou over there?
Yeah, sure, but what's that got to do with...
The pass down there's mighty narrow, isn't it?
Yeah, it's narrow, so what?
So Sullivan will be coming through here in about 10 minutes. There's not a track down there yet, so... What's wrong?
Hey, there he is now.
Yeah. Whaley's well into the pass, so we won't be able to turn around in a hurry. Chick, double back quick. Drive over there behind the herd. When you hear my rifle, start firing. You get me?
Sure.
Mush, you huskies! Mush!
We Once those bulls start running, there ain't a thing on feet that'll stop them. So, you have a meeting with Preston, huh, Sullivan? The only place you two will ever meet will be on the other side of the grave. It's getting closer. Are the chicks ready yet? Now.
It was a week later, and on the trail north of Half Mile where Charlie Sullivan had met his death, Sergeant Preston stood, looking up to the ledge walling the narrow pass.
Clem McCall said this was about where it happened, fella. If Sullivan hadn't sent me a letter, I never would have known he was on his way to Half Mile. And evidently someone else knew, too.
The great dog King walked beside the Mountie, sniffing the air curiously. For mixed with the animal scents that came to his nostrils was another scent, the scent of a man. He looked at Preston questioningly, and then ran over the icy crust of the snow to discover the source. A few minutes later, he came on the man, leaning against a rock, his rifle trained on the Mountie, who walked back along the trail.
Preston's dog, huh?
Almost at the speed of light, King lunged at him, tearing the man's arm from the rifle. And as the dog stood, his fur bristling dangerously, he kept the man from retrieving the weapon that had fallen to the snow.
Caribou herd still in the hills, that's it. I'll get the money the same way I got Sullivan. All right, you mutt. Too bad my revolver's in camp.
King caught the threatening tone in the man's voice, and as the man retreated, leaving the rifle behind, the dog waited until he was out of sight, and then went back to his master. Carefully, the Mountie searched the hills and the trails for the signs of a camp, unaware that the tracks Chandler left in the snow were designed to lead him into a death trap. The next morning, with King leading the dogs, Preston followed the sled tracks of the man who seemed to be playing hide-and-seek with him. The sharpness of the outlines told him he was close to the man he sought.
Well, he's going through the pass, fella. We'll turn here and take the trail through the trees. We'll make better time with luck. We may be able to head him off. On, King! On, you huskies!
A short time later, the Mountie sighted the slope which eased down toward the pass. A herd of peaceful caribou milled around like cattle. Watching them, Preston saw two men standing well behind the herd with rifles resting on their arms. He went toward them, his own rifle in readiness. But King had caught a scent, the scent of a man he recognized, and the dog turned sharply back toward the ledge overlooking the trail.
Oh, you huskies. Hey, what? Hey, Duke, it's a Mountie.
Drop those rifles and put up your hands.
Not before I get a shot at you. Oh, my shoulder! He got my shoulder!
At the sound of the rifle shots, the frightened caribou raised their antlered heads and began to run. The two men standing before the Mountie's rifle looked wide-eyed after the herd, and while Chick Kramer put his hand to his wounded shoulder, an expression of horror crossed his face.
Duke, look! Down there in the pass, it's the boss. The caribou will run him down. He won't have a chance.
Sergeant Preston shifted his position. With his gun still trained on his prisoners, he glanced toward the pass. Standing firmly on the ledge where it graduated into a slope was the great dog King, his eyes fixed on the man looking frantically at the frightened animals running toward him, their treacherous antlers lowered, their flying hooves drumming a terrifying message to the man trapped in front of them. Jack Chandler ran from his team toward the ledge, struggling for a foothold, reaching for brush, a twig, an extended rock. Anything that would save him from the sure death running steadily toward him.
I gotta grab that rock. If it'll hold. Oh, if I can only grab that rock, I'll be above their antlers.
His fingers closed on the edge of the rock. Jack Chandler raised his eyes to face the bared teeth and menacing growl of the dog who had disarmed him the day before. Like a man hypnotized, he looked into the dog's eyes. Then, in a breathless instant, Jack Chandler disappeared, to be swallowed up in the herd of frightened animals his men had stampeded.
Chandler? Why, when Charlie Sullivan got it that way, I never thought the boss would.
Jack Chandler was responsible for the death of several men. He's beyond the law now, but you're not. You're under arrest, both of you.
The great dog rejoined the group of men, satisfied that the man who had fallen from the ledge would never again make an attempt on the life of his master. But as Duke and Chick moved sullenly toward the Mountie's sled with Preston's gun held on them, neither King nor the policeman knew that both men had but one thought: to escape.
It's a good 2 days' trip to town, so we'll hit the trail now. Travel as far as we can, then make camp. All right, get the dogs up, King.
That night, as the light of the campfire flickered low, the two outlaws talked quietly.
You know what's waiting for us when we get to town, Duke.
Yeah, sure. But I ain't aiming to stop one of the Mounties' bullets.
This way we stand a chance. We got the dust stashed away, and now it'll only be a two-way split. I tell you, we got everything to gain and nothing to lose.
King raised his head from between his paws as the two outlaws crept from their bedding.
What is it, fella? Quiet.
Get to your sled, Duke. Come on, get out. Let's get out of here.
Apparently, Sergeant Preston dozed, his head low on his chest, oblivious to the persistent tugs from King's teeth pulling at his sleeve. As the sled started and was well away from the camp...
Oh, don't look so disgusted, fella. They've made a getaway. But if my guess is right, they'll head for the spot where they've got their loot hidden. All right, get the dogs up, boy. We're going after them.
With King leading the dogs, the Mountie followed the tracks clearly edged in the snow. It was after daybreak when they arrived at the cabin. Preston pulled his sled into the protection of a rock formation. Meanwhile, inside the cabin...
Hey, Chick, what are you standing at the window for? Come on, give me a hand with this dust.
Yeah, I should have thought of it. The Mountie, he followed us, Duke. Get your rifle. We'll give him a fight. Just wait till he lifts his head over that rock. Yeah, I think we're going to bag us a Mountie, Duke.
There, give it to him. He's ready to shoot it out, Chick.
Yes, so are we.
For long, endless minutes, the battle waged. Two men against one, the bullets striking against the rock sheltering Preston. And then, at a word from his master, King went silently through the timber, doubling back toward the cabin. The great dog knew what he had to do. Instinctively, he steeled his body for the impact that was to come. The large window was at the side of the cabin. Duke and Chick were firing from the front of it through the cracks in the logs. King measured the distance, then broke into a run, gathering speed with each long stride, and then the jump. Seconds later, the window smashed at the impact of the dog's body.
Hey, the dog, get him, Duke! No!
How can I get him? He don't stay in one place long. They're going to beat him.
Drop your guns. You heard me drop them.
Okay.
Well, I see I'm just in time to take the gold you've collected back to town with me. You're under arrest, both of you. And this time there'll be no escaping. Yes, fella, thanks to your help, the case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They're sent to you each week at the same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon.
On King! On you, King!
The wonder dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his wonder dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. Benjamin Holmes had been a brilliant man, too brilliant. For who is to know or ever understand the strangest and most mysterious of all things, man's mind? In 1890, Professor Holmes had suffered a nervous breakdown, and everyone in Catalpa felt a great compassion for the small, kindly man who absently went his own way. Everyone smiled at his harmless peculiarities. That is, everyone except Joe Flaherty, who was deeply, and it seemed hopelessly, in love with Barbara Holmes. It was early evening in the spring, and on the broad white-painted porch of the Holmes house in the quiet college town, Joe sat on the swing, talking to Barbara.
Surely you can understand how I feel, Joe.
No, I don't understand. You say you love me, Barbara.
And I do.
Oh, if that were true, you would have married me long before this. Why must we waste our lives? Why must you be...
Because Dad needs me.
Well, that's the answer to it, I guess. If you loved me, you'd marry me.
Joe, it'll only be a matter of a few years. The doctors say Dad will be well again. Then we'll get married.
In the meantime, he's plotting out all these crazy schemes. You know what he's talking about now? Going to Peru. Last week it was that invention of his.
But those things are harmless. They don't hurt anyone. They're just ideas.
They're hurting us.
For the last time, I'll explain it to you, Joe. When I was a child, he took care of me. I needed him. Now he's weak and I'm strong. A sort of reversal of roles. And I must take care of him.
Weakness. Weakness is a disease. It's harmful. Because there'll always be strong people on whom the weak will lean, just as your father's doing now. Send him to an institution.
Joe. Oh, Joe, he's not unbalanced. He's sick. And it will take time and patience to cure him. You can see it in his eyes. They're clouded and uncertain where they were once so sure.
There's nothing uncertain about the way he's tying up your life right now. The next thing you know, he's going to be taking off on some of those schemes, and you'll be going right with him. Peru.
Yes, I'll be going with him. I don't suppose you'll ever understand. No matter where he goes or what he does, I'll stay with him till he's well again.
What was that you were saying, Barbara, child?
Oh, Dad, I thought you were in your study.
Oh, so I was, my dear, so I was. I overheard part of what you were saying about going with me. Oh, good evening, Joe. How are you? Yes, what was I saying? Oh, yes. You know, Barbara, I uncovered that old diary of your Uncle Mort's.
Oh, you mean the one he kept while he was away all that
time? The one that... Yes, that's it. Very interesting. He tells about his experiences in a part of British America where no white man had ever been.
Oh, I remember.
Huh?
Yes, he used to tell me a lot of stories about that when I was a child.
I believe they were true stories. He did a great deal of talking about a wealth of gold in that country, and in the diaries he left me there's a definite map, a map showing the way to what he terms the richest vein of gold in the world. Do you imagine?
Yeah, imagine.
Joe, too bad he never lived long enough to go back there, Dad.
My dear, I'll tell you what we're going to do. You and I will go up there. Yes, that's what we'll do. We'll go to this place and find that gold your Uncle Mortimer discovered.
But, Professor Holmes, you don't begin to know anything about mining or prospecting.
Huh?
Why, there's been no discovery of gold in any part of British America. You'd be better off going to Peru. At least you'd stand a chance of uncovering some Peruvian ruins. But gold in that snow-covered North Country...
Because nobody knows about it. There's no sign it isn't up there, my boy. It's there, and Barbara and I'll find it.
You can't start out for some place you don't know anything about.
We not only can, but we will. Barbara, we'll begin packing tomorrow.
Yes?
Joe, it's come. A letter from Barbara.
From Barbara?
Here. Aren't you going to open it?
Yes, of course.
Are they coming back? Are they... Oh, now, isn't that ridiculous? I was so excited, I never even noticed the postmark.
It's postmarked Dawson, Yukon Territory.
A short time later, Joe left the United States. The boat he took passed in mid-ocean, the small steamer that was to nose its way from Alaska through Puget Sound to dock in Seattle, bearing a cargo that would electrify the world, a ton of gold. When the last and greatest gold rush began, Joe Flaherty was already in the Yukon Territory, looking for something that was far more valuable to him than the glittering ore that meant wealth and power.
Several months after his arrival in the Yukon, Joe Flaherty lost his lead dog. In a country where dogs were the only sure means of transportation, he had to buy another one. That was how he came one day to bargain with an old-timer who sold huskies and malamutes.
That's a good-looking dog there. Huh? That husky.
Yeah.
Listen, mister. That dog has the meanest disposition you ever seen. He'll kill anything on 4 legs. Or 2. I throw his feet into that there cage, but he's a working fool. Well, that's the lot of 'em. Got some mighty fine dogs here.
How much for that husky?
Joe Flaherty bought the husky. The dog's name was Duke, a mean and surly animal, his face and body marked by the teeth of the dogs and animals he'd met in combat. At heart, he was wild, but both the dog and the man recognized the silent bond that existed between them. Duke had been owned by many men, but he had accepted none of them as a master until Joe bought him. They covered countless hundreds of miles along the frozen trails of the Yukon. And then one night, they made camp with another man, Reverend Walden.
That dog of yours is going to be lucky if he gets away from those wolves alive.
He'll fight anything his own size or bigger.
Yes, but a pack of hungry wolves. You could break up that fight by firing a shot into the pack.
He'll come out all right. If he doesn't, it'll be because he's weak. Weaker than those wolves. Animals have the right idea. Kill or be killed. Survival of the fittest.
The next night, when he stood talking to Sergeant Preston and a friend of his, Reverend Walden spoke thoughtfully, his eyes staring unseeingly at the comfort of the small, warm cabin.
And he stood there watching the fight, Sergeant. That dog was worth several $100, but he wouldn't interfere because of that philosophy of his.
That is odd. I've never known a man to risk a lead dog in a fight with wolves.
Very foolhardy, I'd say.
Yet, as I watched his face, I could see the struggle going on inside of him. He loved the dog. I've only seen a few men like him before. Well, another year or so, and he will have completely lost all compassion for human weakness and suffering. That sort of man frequently makes a very dangerous killer, doesn't he, Sergeant?
Yes, that's sometimes the case, Reverend Walden. You say the dog came out all right in the fight.
He killed one of the wolves, and I'm sure 1 or 2 more of them carried the marks of his teeth. There's no mistake about it. He's a fighter, wild and cunning, and merciless. The dog's name was Duke.
And the man?
A young fellow, Joe Flaherty.
Flaherty? That's odd. Joe Flaherty. Could you describe him, Reverend Walden?
Benjamin Holmes listened silently to the minister's description. Then the Mountie and the minister listened while he talked.
So perhaps it would be a good idea if we were to meet this young man. He may be the same Joe Flaherty my daughter and I knew in Catawba.
Well, he certainly needs understanding and help, Professor Holmes. He's been badly hurt spiritually. And I'm afraid he'd look on me as an intruder.
We'll start out in the morning, Professor Holmes, you and I. I'm going up to Black Creek anyway, and from what Reverend Walden said, we should meet him along the trail.
Splendid. We won't say anything to Barbara about it. I'm sure it would make her very happy to see an old friend. This is a rather lonely place for the girl. I'll see you in the morning then, Sergeant.
It was late the next evening when Sergeant Preston, with the great dog King leading his pack of dogs, halted the team at a camp beside the trail. Then they looked about for some signs of the man whose sled and packs were beside the campfire. The great dog King walked through the snow not far from Preston and the man and girl who were with him. It was while they walked toward the tall and imposing timber that King became conscious of the other dog's presence. King sensed the husky's antagonism, and as he looked at the dog approaching him, he knew he was looking for a fight. He realized this stranger was not only anxious to assert his supremacy, but determined to. Quietly, the great dog stood in the snow, while the other, broad-breasted and white-fanged, came toward him. It was then Preston turned, and beyond range of the Mountie's vision, Joe Flaherty stood watching the two dogs. Dodging and returning thrust, King measured his antagonist and realized his skill and swiftness. His eyes glowed with a sudden terrible concentration of wariness. A long, bushy tail curling high above his body, the King bared his fangs in a fight that was as primitive and ageless as the struggle for life itself. His teeth found their mark again and again. The husky who had challenged him knew in one glaring, painful instant that here he had met his match. And he sensed, too, in every muscle of his body, steeled with strength and the fierceness of past victories, that this was a battle to the death for him. He would have extended no mercy to his foe, and he expected none. He fought on, for though he had lost, he would not retreat.
Whose dog is that?
It's mine. King.
I've never seen that before. I don't understand it. Whenever Duke's fought with another dog, he's killed him. That's why he's lying in the snow now. He's waiting for the death blow.
There won't be any death blow. Your dog put up a good fight. I didn't see it start, but he made a mistake when he decided to take King over.
King, huh? Well, King isn't a coward, I'll say that. Duke started the fight, but King licked him quickly and fairly. Funny?
What's funny?
I feel almost humble. As if that dog of yours had suddenly made a magnificent gesture. He was challenged, and yet he spared Duke. Duke. Here, boy.
Sergeant Preston, Sergeant. Oh, Dad's so excited. He's discovered 3 pine trees that he thinks is a landmark to that pine Uncle Mortimer discovered.
Barbara! Barbara!
Joe. Joe, is it really you? I can't believe it.
All this time, I've been looking for you. Oh, darling,
This is it, Barbara. I have the map right here. There's no doubt about it. We've located the gold. Well, hello.
Well, hello, Professor Holmes. I guess I might tell you now. I'm going to marry your daughter. I'm not even asking your permission, sir. With or without it, I'm marrying her.
Barbara.
He's right, Dad.
Well, this is an unusual day for Sergeant Preston. Is that your dog, Joe?
Yes. Afraid he'll have to do some recuperating before he's able to hit the trail again. Now, fella. Say, I didn't even notice I was talking to a Mountie. I'm Joe Flaherty.
Glad to know you. King, old boy, let's see how you came out of that fight.
No question about how he came out of it, Sergeant. Almost as good as new. But Duke here... kind of seems like the Duke bowed to the King. But don't let that bother you, fella. Because I've bowed to my Queen.
Darling.
Yes, fella. I think everything here's worked out all right.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They're sent to you each week at this same time. Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network. The Challenge of the Yukon.
I'm King of you Huskies!
The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. Years before the gold rush began, there were many men in the Yukon who knew gold was to be found in the rich soil of a hitherto unknown land, inhabited by Indian tribes and a handful of courageous white pioneers. Sam Benson and his partner Jerry O'Neill were among those pioneers. Sam had gone hunting for caribou early one morning, and in the small log cabin that was his home, his wife looked through the window, her eyes widening in terror.
Indians! Oh, they're coming here. I've never seen them like this before. They're yelling and... I've got to bolt the door. Sam! Oh, Sam, if you were only here. They must have got their hands on some liquor. I'll take Sam's rifle and try to hold him. Oh, quiet, darling. I've got to hide you. Find some place where you'll be safe. Oh, there's such a little bit of time.
late that evening when Sam Benson returned to the cabin. His face a reflection of the fury and terrible fear clouding his mind as his eyes swept across the devastation the Indians had left behind them.
Mary! Mary!
Sam, the Indians...
If they've harmed Mary and the baby, I'll... Now, here she is. Mary! Mary, get some water, Jerry, quick. Don't stand there.
It's no use, Sam. She's dead. That bullet went right through her heart.
No, it isn't true, I tell you. Mary.
Those heathen savages. They were full of red-eye. That's what it was, Sam. Remember, the trader in Lansdowne told us somebody was selling them the stuff. She died fighting, all right. Here's your rifle.
I'll get them for this. Oh, the baby, Jerry. Where's the baby? She's gone. They've killed my wife and taken my baby. Come on.
Where you going, Sam?
I'm going after them. They think they know about killing. I'm going to pay them off for this bullet for bullet with interest.
Sam Benson had no difficulty following the trail of the intoxicated savages. It led through timber and across plains to the Indian village, where the red men sprawled almost unconscious like so much debris. Sam saw a squaw sitting in front of one of the tents, stitching hides.
Look, you talk English.
Yeah. What you want?
These are the same men who stole my cabin a while back. They killed my wife and took my baby daughter. Maybe they killed her, too. I don't know. But I'm going to settle with every last one of them. Where's the chief of the tribe?
Him over there.
Looks like the chief isn't any better than his brave, Sam. He's out cold.
Many braves kill fight with Crees. Long time enemy of tribe. Much killing. Killing because our people drink firewater white man bring. White man no good. Ruin our people. Better they kill them. Better they come kill with guns. That better than this.
How many were killed?
Many men ride from village. Only these return.
Looks like the Crees took care of your killing for you, Sam.
What about my baby? Where's my little girl?
The stoic Indian woman raised her eyes to meet those of the tall white man standing in front of her. Her fingers hesitated over her work. Should she tell this man that her own 2 children had stopped the wild bullets fired by the men of the tribe, killing them both where they stood? Should she tell him that when they brought the fair-skinned child back to the village, she had taken it to her heart?
Baby's mother killed.
Yes, by those murdering red-skinned heathens.
Baby need mother. Need woman take care of baby.
I wasn't asking you about that. Where's my little girl?
Me not know.
Sam looked about him, from one sprawling figure to the other. The wounds many of them bore showed him that the woman had told him the truth. There had been a battle with the Crees. Helplessly, he clenched and unclenched his fists, and then turned, striding hurriedly from the village. It was a day later. Sam Benson stood looking at the small cabin that had been home to him.
Sam, I'd like to ask you something.
Yeah?
You went into that village with murder in your eyes. Whatever changed your mind? Not that I'm not glad it turned out like it did, understand? I don't hold with this eye for an eye business.
You remember the wounded Indians we saw in the village? And how that woman told us about the ones that had been killed?
Yeah, I remember. But none of them knew what they were doing.
Sure. They'd all had so much rum, they were like madmen, fighting and killing. They get that rum from the men who smuggled it through, Jerry.
I don't see what you're driving at.
That woman said rum was ruining the Indians. A ruin that was worse than wholesale slaughter. So I'm going into business to sell them rum.
Years passed, during which Sam Benson traded and sold liquor to the Indians, posing as their friend. In 1898, white men migrated by the thousands to the Yukon, a sudden and sweeping migration that changed Sam's plans. It was early morning, shortly before dawn. In a tent at the edge of an Indian village, the liquor smuggler spoke to a short, heavy-set man who listened to his words intently.
I want you to go into town and keep an eye on the man that has the trading post.
What's his name?
LaRue. Henry LaRue.
Not that the name makes any real difference. Make sure of the hours he keeps, where his cabin is, and what time he leaves the post at night, see?
Yeah, sure. But what are you aiming to do?
Well, the Indians want to get even with a man they think is refusing to trade them the rum. Maybe they'll deal hasty with him. Break into the post and get enough rum to stage a real celebration. Matter of fact, they're ready to commit murder right now.
Murder? Henry LaRue? A lot of Indians will swing for that, Sam. And if the Mounties get the story, our necks will be stretched, too. You can count me out.
By the time a Mountie gets in town to settle the thing, you and I will be making tracks for Skagway, Red. I've just about finished what I set out to do. This is going to be a sort of final performance, you might say.
Two days later, at the edge of a birch forest just outside Ferris City, Sam Benson stood talking to a tall, powerfully built Indian.
Monista will come into town with me, see? He'll wait outside the post till LaRue leaves it. I've already told you what time to be set to mush, but don't start into town till you hear the shot from the rifle. Understand?
Yeah.
Once you hear that, you'll be at the post inside of a few minutes. Red, you stay here. Come into town with the chief here, and I'll be waiting for you.
Yeah, sure, Sam. I know what to do.
All right, Monista, let's travel.
It was shortly before closing time at the LaRue trading post when Sam Benson opened the door and closed it behind him. Walking into the long, rambling room, he stopped short and stared unbelievingly. Sergeant Preston was standing at a counter, talking to a slim, dark-haired girl. Slowly, Sam Benson walked toward them.
You know, I think he works too hard, Sergeant. But then Father's always been like that, at least as long as I can remember. Oh, a late customer, I see. What is it you want?
Some tobacco, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I'll get it for you.
You're a stranger in town, aren't you?
Who is that girl?
Henry LaRue's daughter. Why?
I thought for a minute, why, she reminds me so much of someone I once knew.
I suppose I should say she's Henry's adopted daughter. But he couldn't think any more of her if she were his own.
I brought you 2 packages. I didn't know whether you wanted 1 or 2.
That's a locket you're wearing, isn't it, ma'am?
Locket? Oh, yes, it belonged to my mother.
I bought a locket like that once.
Did you? I often wish I knew more about this one. My mother died, you see. An old Indian woman took care of me when I was a child and gave it to me when my father adopted me. She told me it was my mother's. See the chain on it? Father bought me a new one for it when the other broke. He sent all the way to Seattle for it. Well, what's wrong? Sergeant, catch him. I'm afraid he...
Oh, that's all right. I just lost my balance.
Oh.
Here. I guess that'll take care of the tobacco.
Well, I think I'll be on my way. If you're leaving now, Miss LaRue, I'll walk you to the cabin.
Oh, good. Father's staying to close up.
It was already dark as Sam Benson followed the Mountie and Marie LaRue down the main street of Ferris City. After Preston left the girl at the door of her cabin, Sam hurried toward him.
Sergeant, wait a minute.
Yes?
I don't have much time, but there's a band of unfriendly Indians just outside town. As soon as it gets dark, I'm afraid there'll be trouble. They didn't know you were here. But if you go out there, once they sight your uniform, they'll quiet down.
You're Sam Benson, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Why?
I've been warned to keep my eye on you. Matter of fact, I've been waiting for you to turn up in town.
Why?
I want to talk to you about liquor smuggling, but that can come later. What you say is true.
It's true, all right. You'd better hurry, Sergeant. There's no time to lose.
The Mountie looked sharply at the lined, embittered face of the man in front of him. But in Sam Benson's eyes, he saw an urgency that was genuine. And turning on his heel, he walked quickly toward his sled. Out of the corner of his eye, Sam saw the Indian striding up the street to take his place across from the trading post.
I gotta slip in the back way. That Indian's liable to start looking for trouble if he suspects anything.
Who in the world's coming to the back door? Don't seem to want to seem an obliging stranger, but I was just about to put the lamps out. What can I do for you?
Are you Henry LaRue?
Yes, I am. I don't believe I've ever seen you before.
Is that your Mackinaw hanging over there on that hook?
Well, sure it is. Why all the questions, stranger? You're acting mighty funny.
I'm sorry, but... Oh. That's not such a good way to pay you for being a father to my daughter, but... Better blow out this lamp. Gotta get this Mackinac on. There. Find my way to the door in the dark. Oh.
An hour later, Sergeant Preston stood in the relighted trading post. Henry LaRue rubbed his jaw, twisting his face painfully, while Marie pensively toyed with the locket hanging around her neck.
Funniest thing I've ever heard of. Knocked me out and didn't take a thing from the store.
I got a story from the Indian who killed Benson, Henry. He claimed, and the rest of the tribe backed him up, that Benson planned the whole thing, only that bullet was meant for you.
He was even wearing my Mackinac. I don't understand it. If this man planned to kill me, why would he?
know? When I talked to the Indians, I put Benson's accomplice under arrest, a man named Red Walters. I knew Benson was working with somebody, but I didn't know who.
Well, what did he say, Sergeant?
He said that Benson had some sort of a grudge against the Indians, and that was the reason he sold them liquor. But Walters never knew what that grudge was. It's an odd case.
Even King looks a little puzzled about it.
I guess King's just echoing my frame of mind. But thanks to him, we were able to reach those Indians in double-quick time. They were all ready to go on the warpath, believe me.
And he seemed like such a nice man. You remember, Sergeant? He was so interested in my locket.
Yes, I remember. But I guess we'll never really know all the answers. Yes, fellow. In spite of that, the case is closed.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They are sent to you each week at the same time. This is Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network.
The challenge of the Yukon. I'm King, and you husky. King, the swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the Yukon during the gold rush of '98. That was the year that brought over 50,000 men swarming into the Klondike region, and the greed for gold led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, the force preserved a splendid record in maintaining the right. The challenge of the North was answered, and justice ruled triumphant. The sweating bartender at the Black Crow Cafe worked hurriedly, filling and refilling glasses for the men shouting at him from all sides. The room was warm and crowded, thick with raucous laughter and the heavy voices of miners just in from the creek beds. At the far end of the bar, Les Peterson stood talking to a tall, thin man dressed as a prospector, a man you'd notice in any crowd. The left side of his face was marked with a jagged scar that distorted his features, giving him an unpleasant, sneering expression.
Hey, you had mighty unusual luck, mister. Ain't many men strike it rich so soon.
I've been lucky all my life. Friends used to call me Lucky Wally. Come out to the claim sometime.
Yeah, I'll do that.
The only time I see a white man to talk to is when I come in here. Well, so long, old man.
Red, fix me up another one, will you?
Well, I thought I'd find you here, Les.
Hi there, Sergeant. See, you got King right with you. How are you, boy, huh? Yeah, it's a great dog.
You bet he is, Les. Worth twice his weight in gold.
Did you see Doc? I'm supposed to meet him here for a game of poker.
I was talking to him earlier this evening. He said he'd be here.
Well, he's late as usual. He's a funny guy, Sergeant.
Oh, Doc?
Yeah, I've known him for almost 2 years now. And all I can say about him, he's a sawbones. He sure don't talk much about himself.
No, he doesn't. I saw him operate once under almost impossible conditions. Pulled the patient through, too. He's a fine doctor, Les. But then every man's business is his own.
As long as he keeps it on the right side of the law. Speak of it. Here he comes now. Hey, Doc, over here. I got a feeling this is my lucky night, Sergeant.
Now, that means you think you have a chance of winning back some of that gold that's going into Doc's pocket, I suppose.
I don't think it, I know it.
Sorry if I kept you waiting, Les. Hello, Sergeant.
How are you, Doc?
Fine.
You always keep me waiting, so don't make it sound unusual. Have a drink.
That's what I'm here for.
Red! Hey, Red! Well, you have to wave a flag to get his attention tonight.
It's crowded, all right.
Here you are, Doc.
Oh, thanks, Red. What about you, Sergeant?
No, nothing for me, thanks.
Well, you know the Mounties, Doc. Always on duty. I'm telling you, I don't know how they stand it.
Well, being a drinking man, it would be a little hard for you to understand, Les.
Les thinks he's going to clean out your pockets tonight, Doc.
Yes?
Yes, sirree. I feel lucky tonight. Well, come on. Let's get this table over here before someone else spots it. Wait till I get the deck out. Say, you know, that's funny.
What?
Me making that crack that I felt like this is my lucky night.
Les, your luck never changes. You should know that by this time.
No, I'm serious. While I was standing here waiting for Doc, a tall, skinny fellow was next to me. I noticed him because the scar on his left cheek, mean-looking thing, pulled his whole face off balance.
On his left?
Yeah. Says he's got a claim staked this side of Birch Creek.
Yes?
Well, we got talking. He was telling me how he got his claim staked. Seems like he's only been here a short time. I told him he was mighty lucky striking it. He said he'd always been lucky. Said his friends called him Lucky Wally. Maybe I just got luck on the brain. I hope some of his brushes off on me.
What'd you say his friends called him?
Lucky Wally. Why? What's wrong, Doc? You look like you'd seen a ghost. You know him?
Oh, know him? Well, you meet lots of people, Les. Where is he staked?
This side of Birch Creek.
How long ago did you see him?
Oh, not so long. Oh, what's wrong, Doc? You're as white as snow.
Les, I wonder if you'd mind if we make this game for tomorrow night.
Huh?
His luck might be changed then.
Sorry. You'll have to excuse me.
Well, hold on. Wait a minute.
He can't hear you, Les.
How do you like that? We're just sitting here. I'm even cutting the deck, and he gets up and walks out. Well, it don't make sense. I can't say anything to make him mad. He's an even-tempered gent. He sure had a funny look in his face when he pushed that chair back.
Yes. I wonder.
Might as well have another drink, I guess.
It's a slim hunch.
What?
Doc was ready enough for that poker game before you mentioned that man you'd been talking to at the bar.
You mean the fella that called himself Lucky Wally?
That's right, the man with the scar.
Oh, that's what I thought. Doc looked like he'd seen somebody come back from the dead. Like he couldn't believe it. Yet he hoped it was right.
Where'd you say that man is staked?
Birch Creek. Why?
I'm going out there. Good night, Les. Come on, King.
First Doc, and now you. Hey, Red, give me another drink.
I have to make good time, King. I've seen the look in Doc's eyes in other men. Men bent on murder.
The lights from the cafe spilled on the snow as Sergeant Preston adjusted his parka against the biting cold of the penetrating wind.
Get the dogs up, King. On, King! On, you huskies!
King ran ahead of the pack, never once losing the trail, though it was hidden from Preston's eyes by darkness. The sled covered the miles, nearer and nearer to Birch Creek.
There it is, boy, ahead. Lights from the cabin. I wonder if we're only in time. Ho, King! Ho, you huskies! Now, we'll leave the sled here in the shadows of the cabin. Someone else had the same idea. All right, fella.
So you finally Oh, Sergeant Preston. How did you...
Mind if I come in, Doc?
No. Who are you looking for?
I found the man I'm looking for.
What do you mean?
I thought so. A gun, huh? Yours, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
When you left the cafe tonight, you had a look in your eyes I've seen before. You know, I've been a policeman for a long time. Suppose you tell me why you want to kill this Lucky Wally.
How'd you know?
Well, there's no time to waste. He may be back any minute.
All right, sit down, Sergeant. I will tell you. But I'm going through with it. You're not going to stop me.
How long have you known him?
I knew him back in the States. Goes back almost 15 years ago.
Yes?
Wally was an only child. The only grandchild of Mrs. McCready, Mrs. Randolph McCready. He was just a kid when I first met him. But even then, you could see that selfish greediness in his eyes. And as he grew up, his greed and his recklessness grew with him. I won't burden you with details, Sergeant. I was Mrs. McCready's physician.
His mother and father?
Both of them died when he was a baby. She doted on him, spoiled him, gave him everything he wanted. She had a bad heart. Perhaps you heard of the scandal that broke 3 years ago when she died suddenly.
Yes. The McCready emerald was stolen at the time of her death. Never been discovered. It was...
Yes, it was murder. I was blamed for the murder because the sleeping tablets I gave her caused the death. Wally had done it. Mrs. McCready had been very kind to me. Put me through medical school when I was a boy, as a matter of fact. I think he was afraid she might leave some of her money to me. But that was ridiculous.
I know you were completely exonerated in the trial.
You knew that, but you never said anything.
Why should I? Man's past is his own.
Well, it ruined me. My practice fell to nothing as a result of the publicity. I'd heard Wally speak of the Yukon many times. I knew that someday he'd come up here. Well, that's why I came here.
He's guilty of murder.
It's never been proved.
And the emerald?
I'm convinced that he has it. He'd never dare sell it. At least not for another few years.
I see.
I swore I'd get him, Sergeant. No matter how long I waited, no matter how far I had to go. I knew someday I'd meet him again.
You can't take the law into your own hands.
I can make him pay for murdering the woman who was like a mother to me, and he will pay.
He's already a murderer. Killing him will make you one.
There's no other way.
Yes, there is another way. Another way that you can perhaps have him jailed for the murder he committed.
I know what I'm doing, Sergeant. And I won't let anything stand in my way.
Listen to me, Doc. You mustn't let your desire for revenge blind you. Now listen to my plan. You'll come back to the cabin and find you here. Doc, you just use that.
The hours dragged on while Doc sat in the lonely cabin waiting for Wally McCready to return. King waited with him, listening.
So he's coming. All right, King, we're ready for him.
What the...
Come on in, Wally, and shut the door.
You... How'd you...
You look surprised. I made myself at home. Here, sit down and have some tea. It'll warm you up.
I am surprised. You're the last person I'd expect to meet up here, McGregor.
Why not up here? It's as good as any place else. Especially when you're a ruined man.
Oh, you're thinking of...
Yes, the trial. Of course, you don't remember it.
Well, I read about it, all right. They freed you. Never did prove who killed the old lady, did they?
They know the man who killed her made off with the emerald.
Yeah? That's interesting, Doc. Well, I'll say this much for you. You make a good cup of tea.
Glad you like it.
What are you up here for? Gold?
No. No, I came here because I knew sooner or later you would.
Me?
That's right. You always wanted to come up here and try that luck of yours.
And it's still holding out, too. Oh, I struck a claim that'd knock your eyes out. And it's all mine, every bit of it. It's too bad you didn't have some of my luck, Doc. You could have used it.
I'm satisfied.
What are you looking at?
You? I'm wondering how long it'll be before you start feeling dizzy and sleepy.
Before I...
That tea you drank, Wally.
What's wrong with it?
It was a good enough way for your grandmother to die. It ought to be good enough for you.
You poisoned me.
I've waited a long time for this, and you walked right into it.
No, it can't be.
Your feet, they'll start to get numb soon.
Listen, I drank it. I drank all of it.
It'll be painless, just like going to sleep. Only you'll never wake up. You don't deserve to die painlessly.
You gotta save me. I tell you, I'll turn the whole claim over to you.
You're beginning to feel it, huh? Beginning to get dizzy?
The whole claim, every bit of gold in it, it's all yours. There's something that'll save me. I know there is. I remember.
I don't want your gold.
I am beginning to get dizzy. My head. Now,
I'm leaving you, Wally.
No, don't go. What do you want? Name your own price. Anything you say. You can save me, can't you?
Yes, in my bag out on the sled I have the antidote.
Oh, bring it in. Anything you want. I'll sign all of mine over to you. I'll do anything you say. But hurry.
There's only one thing I want.
Well, what is it? Quick, what is it?
The emerald. The emerald, Wally. That's what I want.
The emerald?
Yes. You took it from the safe. You've kept it with you all these years, haven't you?
All right, it's yours.
I want it in my hands.
Well, get that stuff before it's too late.
You have a few more minutes. Get the emerald.
Here. It's in this pouch around my neck. Take it.
Oh, I was right. You did it because she suspected you'd been taking money from the safe.
Yes. Now you have it. Now get that stuff.
You're under arrest.
What?
You did a great job, Doc.
Well, there was nothing to it, son.
He's poisoned me. I tell you, I'll die if he doesn't.
You'll die, all right. But it'll be with a rope around your neck and not a pouch containing the McCready emerald.
No, you don't understand.
There was nothing in that tea, Wally.
You mean you lied to me? It was a trick.
Yes, it was a trick. I had planned to kill you, but Sergeant Preston changed my mind. I knew you murdered your grandmother, but I had to have proof.
Put these handcuffs on him, Doc. We'll take him back to Fort Munn tonight.
All right. I know when I'm licked.
Why did you insist King stay in this room with me, Sergeant?
I was afraid Wally might pull a gun on you. King's used to handling a situation like that. I did it more to protect you than anything else. This arrest and your part in it, Doc, should wipe away all the unfavorable publicity you had as a result of the trial. You'll be able to go back to the States and take the place you deserve.
I'll never be able to thank you.
Yes, King, the case is closed.
Challenge of the Yukon, a copyrighted feature of the Challenge of the Yukon Incorporated, is brought to you each week at this same time and originates in the studios of WXYZ Detroit. All characters, names, places, and incidents used in this drama are purely fictitious. Bob Height speaking, this is the Michigan Radio Network. Bob Height speaking, this is the Michigan Radio Network. Bob Height speaking.
The Challenge of the Yukon.
On King! On you Huskies!
The Wonder Dog King, swiftest and strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the new Northwest country, where the greed for wealth and power led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, Sergeant Preston and his Wonder Dog King met that challenge, and justice ruled triumphant. Sergeant Preston and the great dog King had stopped for the night at Mark Willoughby's small cabin. Although it was close to the time when spring would come to the North Country, winter still held the land in an icy grasp that would be broken only when the Chinook wind swept across it to free lakes and rivers and the snowbound earth. With the wind whipping about the snug building, the warmth and comfort indoors were welcome to the Mountie, and he leaned back, tilting his chair as he looked about him.
You know, Mart, a man could just stand in the doorway of this cabin and he'd know immediately the place had a woman running it.
Yeah, that's so, eh? Well, I'll have you know I just put up with Julie's fripperies to please the girl. Fine thing, I say, having drapes on the windows and everything.
Mm-hmm. You object, hmm?
Much good it'd do me if I did. That girl does pretty much what she wants to. Besides, she finds the time to spoil her old dad.
What's that you're saying, Dad?
He's just telling me what a good housekeeper you are, Julie.
Oh, he is he? Well, he puts up an awful fuss, Sergeant. But I say that if you're going to live in this wilderness, you might as well make a home out of it.
You've done a fine job.
Go on, praise her and flatter her, man. Don't you know she's hard enough to get along with anyway? Once her head's turned with a bit of flattery.
He's like that all the time, Sergeant. But don't let him fool you. He really likes having the cabin fixed this way.
Yes, glad I am that the sergeant's staying here tonight instead of with that old horse trader down the trail a bit.
Bishop?
Yeah, Bishop. Any man who swear by horses instead of dogs in a country like this ain't fit to associate with.
Now, wait a minute, Mart. Simon's a pretty good chap.
Not in my estimation, he ain't. Unreasonable, stubborn cuss. Can't talk sense into him nohow. How a man figures to keep a pack of horses and refuses to have anything to do with dogs, well, it's beyond me. Oh, sir, you're talking to a dog lover, Sergeant. You and me have a lot in common. But them bishops...
Honestly, Sergeant, if this isn't the silliest sort of feud I ever heard of. They keep at it all the time when they're talking, which isn't even half of the time.
Yeah.
Jim and his father are both very nice.
Yeah, that'll be enough out of you, girl. I'll have no daughter of mine sticking up for them that don't love, understand, or appreciate dogs.
And you call Simon Bishop unreasonable.
It seems to me, Mart, there's a lot to be said for both of you. A lot of men keep horses up here and find them very useful.
Yeah, well, I ain't one of them. I can't say I ever saw a horse that was worth the hair it took to feed him. That's my last word on it.
Two grown men refusing to talk to each other, practically, because one loves horses and the other loves dogs. It couldn't happen anywhere but in the Yukon.
Oh, you're right there. In a country as lonely as this is, small things have a tendency to be more irritating. You know, I've known men to live together in a cabin where they've been cut off from the rest of the world entirely. And invariably, before many months have passed, they've ceased speaking to each other.
Oh, it's a terrible thing.
Nothing terrible about it. Plain as a nose on Bishop's face. He's wrong, but he's too stubborn to admit it. Horses might be all right in that bluegrass country he comes from back in the United States, but every animal has its element, and horses just wasn't made for the Yukon. And the man that says they are is plain stupid.
Well, now, who do you suppose that
I'll
could
see
be?
who it is, child. Can't imagine who'd be coming this time of night. Who it? Well, speak of the devil.
Now, don't go getting any fool notions in that head of yours, Willoughby. Me and Jim heard the sergeant was staying at your cabin, and we dropped over to ask him to stop by at our place tomorrow for a few minutes.
That's so, huh? Well, you can... you might as well come in out of the cold for a minute and tell him yourself, I guess. I ain't delivering any messages for you.
How are you, Sam? Hello there, Jim.
Hello, Sergeant.
Will you sit down for a few minutes?
No, sir. I mean, ma'am. We didn't come over here looking for no hospitality. Oh, Sergeant, you'll be hitting the trail tomorrow morning?
Yes, that's right.
Well, if you got the time, me and Jim would like to have you stop by for a few minutes. Seeing as how you kind of got off on the wrong track staying here. Of course, you come to it before you come to our place. So I can't say as I blame you much. But just the same...
Look here, Sam Bishop. As long as you're in my house, I'll thank you to keep a civil tongue in your head. There's folks that are welcome in this house and them that ain't.
Dad.
And you don't have to get so high and mighty with me, you fish-drying kennel keeper. We ain't staying.
And we won't miss you none when you leave.
Just a minute, Mart. I think...
We're leaving, Sergeant. But like I said, me and Jim will be looking for you tomorrow.
Good night, Mr. Bishop. Good night, Jim.
I'll see you in the morning, Sam.
Well, Sergeant, I thought you was a man of more choosy company.
Dad, you certainly didn't make them feel very welcome.
Why should I? You heard what they called me, didn't you? Kennel keeper. I'll show that blacksmith who's right. Mark my words, I will. Horses in the Yukon. If you was a right-thinking daughter, you would have asked him to stay.
Well, I guess I'll turn in. I hate to see two men as fine as you and Simon Bishop feuding over a difference of opinion, Mart.
Yeah.
Someday you might both need each other's help.
Not much I'll ever need his help. I'll put some oil in this other lamp for you, Sergeant. Just a minute.
And what do you think of the Bishops, Julie? The younger one especially.
The younger... Oh, you mean Jim. Well, I don't think that...
I thought so.
You thought what, Sergeant?
When Jim walked in here, he had eyes for only one person in this room. You're not so difficult to read yourself. Well, I don't know. Let's hope it all works out for the best.
The next morning, Sergeant Preston left the small cabin, intending to stop for a short time at Simon Bishop's cabin, and then continue on into the country of the Yukon Indians. Meanwhile, life went on as usual for Mart Willoughby. He left his cabin early in the morning and worked almost till darkness,
looking for the gold that had led thousands to the North Country.
Well, it was mighty nice of you to stop for a minute, Pierre.
Well, I was on my way to the cabin. I thought I would stop in to see Julie.
Yeah.
Oh, she is a very beautiful girl, Monsieur Willoughby.
Yeah. I think that young Jim Bishop thinks the same thing.
And the young man, you do not like him, huh?
Like him? I ain't got time for neither one of them bishops. Neither does my daughter, for that matter. Well, look at that.
Oh, you chose a wise spot this morning.
Wise? Why, it's the best. Here, let me get some more of that there dirt. Oh, by golly, this place is full of it. I'm rich. Wait till Julie hears about it.
Several hours later, Mark Willoughby was back at the cabin, excitedly getting ready for a trip to Seahorse City.
So I took one look at it, and I said to myself, this is it. We're rich, Julie and me.
Dad?
Hand me my Mackinaw, will you, Julie?
Here you are. You said Pierre Bouchard was with you at the creek.
Yes, so he was.
Well, he came by here not 15 minutes before you got home, and he was heading towards town.
Heading toward town? Why, he said he was going to stop by at the cabin to see you.
Well, he didn't. And what's more, I watched him. He didn't take the turn in the trail to head out to his place. I tell you, he was going to Seahorse City, Dad, and I don't like it.
I don't like to think you're right. But then you can't trust nobody. Come on, Julie girl, we ain't wasting any time.
As Mark Willoughby and his daughter Julie approached Blackstone Creek, the old prospectors slowed the dogs. Farther up the creek, countless hundreds of men worked along the banks, seeking in the rich soil the gold that had been there for centuries. Below them, there was a widening in the creek where the silt from their sluicing operations had overflowed the whole creek bed, making a flat of quicksand about a quarter of a mile wide. That particular part of the country had been dotted with prospect holes 12 to 14 feet deep, and the silt had covered everything so that it was impossible to know whether the apparently flat mud was a quarter of an inch deep or the depth of the deepest hole.
Hey, easy there, you huskies.
Oh, Dad, this is treachery.
You better get out of the sled.
Be careful, Dad.
Yeah. I'll try using this pole here. Going along like a blind man trying to see where it's safe to step.
The dog!
The dog's in the whole sled. They'll go under.
Oh, Dad, stay away from them.
Confound it, I gotta do something. I can't stand here and watch my own team be swallowed up like there was nothing.
Oh, we've got to get help. Dad, look. Somebody's coming.
I sure hope they get here in time.
It's Sergeant Preston.
Yeah, it's Simon Bishop. Hey, Sergeant.
Okay, hold your melon. Oh, there, boy. Oh, there. What's the trouble, Master?
It's my team. I'll lose him. My team and the gold that's under the tarp on the sled. The whole business is just...
Simon, bring your horse over here. Hurry.
Sure.
Acting quickly, the policeman fastened a rope to the sled that was trapped in the quicksand. The floundering dogs barking helplessly in the clutches of the mud that sucked at them.
All right, son, get him moving. Get up, Bluegrass. Come on, fella. Get up there. Go on there. Get up, Bluegrass. More pull, son. It's coming. Get up there.
All eyes were glued to the sled and dog team that were slowly pulled from the muddy and oozing death trap. As Mart watched, the realization gradually came to him that if it had not been for Syme's horse, his dogs, in which he had such pride, would have been swallowed up in the treacherous mud hole. And when he saw that the strong and willing horse had finally pulled his dog team to safety, he also realized that Syme's pride in his horses was not unfounded. Though at the moment he said nothing about it, he determined to make amends for his heretofore unreasonable actions toward the man whose horse had saved the dogs he loved.
Yeah, they're all right. The dogs, they're all right.
Why, sure they're all right, old idiot. They probably swallowed a powerful lot of mud.
Oh, by golly, I sure am glad you came along. Jumping Jupiter, I near forgot. Sergeant,
How about taking us into town? I gotta get to the city before that Pierre Bouchard beats me to the recorder's office.
It was a short time later, outside the claim recorder's office in Seahorse City. Mart Willoughby stood with a proud but somewhat sheepish expression on his face.
That horse of yours did a mighty nice job of pulling my dogs out of that hole. You know, they'd be dead now if it wasn't for him, Sam.
Yes, and Sergeant Preston's dog sure burned the wind getting you to town in time to beat Bouchard. Good animals, dogs.
Oh, concern it, man. Let's shake hands on that. And say, I'll buy a round of drinks to the pullingest horse I ever laid eyes on. Bluegrass.
Julie, I wonder if there's a minister in town.
I don't know, Jim. Why?
Well, while your father and mine are on speaking terms, we might as well take advantage of it. This way, they'll both be at the wedding.
Oh, I see. A very good idea, Jim Bishop.
Well, I'll be doggone.
And you two better see the king and I get an invitation to the wedding. Yes, fellow. I think everything here is going to be all right for quite a while.
These copyrighted dramas originate in the studios of WXYZ Detroit, and all characters, names, places, and incidents used are fictitious. They're sent to you each week at the same time. This is Jack McCarthy speaking. This is the Michigan Radio Network.
Thanks for watching The Challenge of the Yukon with us. This show was developed after the successful hits that Trendle had with The Lone Ranger and The Green Hornet. So by 1938, Trendle was looking for the next big hit. It said that Tom Dougal had come up with the idea of kind of the Northwest theme. And the other thing that Trendle wanted was a Lone Ranger type character, but instead of having a horse, he wanted a dog with this character. So Yukon King was born. So they came up with King as the dog. And they wanted a dog who was not like Rin Tin Tin, but like a working dog. What kind of dog would you have in the Northwest but a husky? And then who would own a husky except a Mountie? So then Sergeant Preston was born. Now while Sergeant Preston had a horse named Rex that he rode in the summer months, it was mostly just him and King out in the wild Northwest fighting bad guys. Of course, every episode would end with Preston saying to King, "Well, King, thanks to you, this case is closed." Now, when Challenge of the Yukon was picked up by the national radio stations, Quaker Puffed Wheat and Quaker Puffed Rice were the sponsors. It always began with that iconic gunshot sound, followed by the words, "The breakfast cereal shot from guns." Honestly, every time I hear that particular sound effect used, I always think of Challenge of the Yukon and the Quaker Puffed Wheat, Puffed Rice intro. Now, the show had the same sound as Lone Ranger and Green Hornet, had many of the same actors, and many of the same themes. In fact, Fran Stryker was the writer on this series too. It really resonated with audiences because it was themes and writers and scenarios they were used to, actors, voices, everything they were used to, but it gave them a new outlet in the exciting Northwest territory of the Yukon. Thanks so much for watching with us. And remember, if you'd like to support the channel, you can click the links below in the description to either buy us a coffee or check out one of the many affiliates that we have listed. And remember, if you purchase something through an affiliate link, we're not sponsored by them at all, but we may make a little commission. Not going to affect your price at all, but it's just going to help support the channel. It helps me continue to bring you this great free content. Thanks once again for joining us for the Challenge of the Yukon. And as always, thanks for tuning in.